See, everybody was saying after the first period that Sweden was in trouble, but you know international hockey well. The Swedes play for 60 minutes. They don't play for 20, correct? I mean, they're
Yeah,
just a patient. They play a patient game, right?
they do, and Finland also. Those teams, they seem to have. I'm not sure the reason, but especially a team like Finland, because they've had some great players, John, and I think growing up, maybe because they. I'm trying to think, maybe because when these guys were younger, they played on a bigger ice surface, and they don't have a lot of players like Canada and USA does now, but they seem to be more two-way kind of players. Like when you think about Finland, even a team like Finland, when in our day you can remember like Solani and Jari Kurri,
Sure.
Tikkanen, those kind of players. Lettinen, the one that they like Lettinen, the one that played with Modano. They didn't have specialists. We have. I mean, I coached in Montreal in the '70s, and I'm not sure about Wayne, but like Guy Lafleur never killed a penalty. Like we never had to use. We had enough players that we had special. I think we started the specialists sort of. Like I don't consider McDavid and those guys specialists, but they don't kill penalties. Like they don't have to play. I think this. If you look at Finland. Those kind of players that are on the team, like Barkov and these kind of guys, that they do everything for their team, even on the NHL.
Yeah.
They grow up that way. Maybe because they didn't have a lot of players, and that's the formula that you play in those European. But Sweden's the same. They're very structured. You're right. They're very structured players. They play a very disciplined type of game, and you can stay in if you get goaltending. I mean, you need the goaltending in this tournament,
Right.
sure. And I don't know if that's the thing. I look at I got Canada and USA forwards pretty well on a par, and then I look at the Swedish defensemen. I'm really impressed with the players that they have on defense. Sweden, they're good players. I mean, they're even an Eric Carlson in a tournament like this, where there's a lot of speed and he played pretty steady the other night, and he's in Pittsburgh. Now he's with his own kind of, and they've played together a lot, haven't they? More than maybe
Yes. Yeah.
they.
Yeah. Hey, I got to. Now we will finish talking about Four Nations, but I got to. The moment you said Guy killing penalties, I've got to ask you: would Guy be happy killing penalties? If you'd walked down and said, "By the way, Guy, we need you to kill this penalty," would he have turned around and said, "Scotty, I don't kill penalties"?
Probably said he would be wasting energy doing it. I don't know. No, well, that's right. I mean, those kind of players that came up, well, it's every team's different, but I'm sure of even before me, like the great players in Montreal that were there before me, and I had some of them at the end, like Yvan Cornway and fellas like Henri Richard and I guess even I don't remember if even Jean Beliveau, because in their prime it was always Marshall, Don Marshall, and
Sure.
Provo, and like it was a I don't know when there was only six teams in the league. I'm thinking of this, that when there was only six teams in the league, the players that made the NHL, but generally were players that were good offensively and defensively until expansion came. And the ones that couldn't score really had a hard time making the team. The ones that didn't play defense, because all those six-man teams, they were all guys that had to do everything. And I don't know when it changed. It probably changed in around the '70s. That's when it changed.
Jack Eichel is a guy that started killing penalties the last couple of years, and turned out to be really skilled at it. Long stick, reads the play really well. He looked like he was noticeable last night, not just because I'm in Vegas, but looked like
No.
he took a step last night.
Well, you're right, Darren, because there's been a lot of criticism the last 2 or 3 weeks about Connor Bedard.
Mhm.
Everybody's been taking a shot at him, and they're saying about. I happen to know the coach very well, Anders Sorensen. I have a grandson that's in college now, but he played for him when he coached this youth team in Chicago 15 years ago at Mission. I mean, Anders Sorensen had a midget team in Chicago, and he never won the championship. I keep kidding him about it because I really like him. He's a nice man. His top line was Nick Schmaltz, William Nylander, and Christian Dvorak. They played together as a midget line, and I said, "You didn't win the Nationals." But no, I said, I talked with him a little bit, and I said, maybe like Patrick Kane never had to kill penalties. Jonathan Toews did. That's just the way it sort of made Jonathan was a little bigger. They came up together too, but that was the way that they were. I guess Jonathan maybe had done that in college or wherever he came from. Yeah, from college. But I just wonder when you get a young player. Well, Sidney Crosby, I don't think Sidney killed penalties his first half a dozen years. Am I right, John? I don't.
I think you're right, Scotty. Yeah.
So I've been saying to Anders, like, maybe when I know from a fact I had Jacques Lemaire in junior, and Jacques was a high scoring winger that could play a little bit of center and didn't play any defense. I mean, it's true. It's true. I mean,
hard to imagine now, huh?
I know.
To imagine.
I know. And I mean, I used to kid him. I used to coach him. And I said, Jock, if you don't learn how to play and kill some penalties, I mean, I used to try to use him on penalties, but they wanted to score goals. And I think that's what we do how do you get drafted in the NHL? You don't get, there's very few players. The one player that comes to my mind that got drafted because he was not a scorer, but he was a defensive player, and I give all the credit to the late Claude Ruel. He stuck his neck out. He drafted a player that scored 15 goals in junior, and the 8th pick on the draft, Bob Gainey.
Sure.
I mean, Bob Gainey was a checker in junior, but look what he did in the NHL. So I'm wondering if you get a young player. I mean, but when you're coaching in the NHL, you're coaching with the standings. So can you take the time to use a good young player to kill penalties? And it's not that easy when you're a young kid, like Connor Bedard is not a big guy, and he's got a lot of pressure on him. And like how they're criticizing him now that he's taking chances offensively. But I mean, they all did it. And, like look at Connor McDavid. I mean, I don't think Connor kills any penalties.
Not anymore. Chris Knobloch actually took him off that.
Yeah.
And with the philosophy that he needed his bottom six guys to be more involved.
And also he needs offense too.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. So anyways, that's what I look at with these tournaments that, you got to get all kinds of players. But I just think I look at the rosters of Canada, and I don't find a lot of difference in the two. And people are saying, well, what about the goaltending? But, well, I mean, in a one game deal, a goaltender can rise to the occasion, and he can win a game for a team.